My name is Emily, and this is the part of my life I never imagined I would put into words. Even as I say it out loud, I can feel the heat of shame creeping across my skin. For years I believed I knew exactly who I was. A devoted wife, a woman who loved stability, who found comfort in loyalty and routine. Mark and I had been married for nearly 8 years, and our lives had become predictable in a way I thought was safe. We woke up at the same time every morning, made coffee the same way, shared the same quiet evenings watching shows together. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. Or at least I thought it was enough. Something in Mark began to shift about a year ago. At first, I dismissed it as stress from work or simply the dull ache of time wearing down on our relationship. But then I noticed the small comments he would make in passing. Questions like, "Don't you ever wonder what it would feel like to step outside of all this?" Or, "Do you ever think about things we've never done before?" He said them playfully, half smiling, but there was a seriousness hiding in his eyes. I ignored it, laughed it off, or changed the subject. But in the silence afterward, my mind would replay his words until they took root. One night, as we sat across from each other with a half-finished bottle of wine between us, he finally stopped hinting and said it outright. His voice was calm, deliberate, as though he had rehearsed it many times before. "Emily," he began, "there's something I need to tell you. It's something I've been thinking about for a long time." My stomach tightened instantly, bracing for bad news. Instead, he leaned forward, lowered his voice, and said, "I want you to be with 2 men. Not just any men. I want them to be black men. It's something I've fantasized about, and I want us to do it. Together." The glass in my hand trembled. I stared at him, unable to process what I had just heard. My husband, the man who had stood beside me at the altar, the man who had promised forever, was asking me to betray the very vows we built our lives on. My throat went dry as I whispered, "You can't be serious." But his face was steady, almost relieved, as though he had finally released the weight of a secret he had been carrying too long. "I am serious," he said. "This isn't about you doing something behind my back. This is me wanting it, needing it. I want to see you like that." The room felt suddenly smaller, the air heavier. My heart pounded, each beat echoing the word no in my head. And yet, behind the fear, a dangerous curiosity flickered. I hated that part of myself, the part that wondered what it would mean to step outside the narrow lines of marriage. I thought about the monotony that had settled between us, about the quiet dinners and silent evenings. Was this his way of escaping it? Or was it mine? 4 days after his confession, I lived in 2 worlds. In one, I was the dutiful wife, folding laundry, cooking meals, and pretending nothing had changed. In the other, I was consumed by his words, replaying them in my mind, imagining scenarios I never wanted to imagine. I tried to reason with him, tried to understand. "Why me? Why yes? Why would you want something like that?" I asked him one night, my voice cracking. He took my hand and said softly, "Because it excites me. Because I love you enough to want you to experience it. And because watching you, being there with you, would make me feel closer to you, not farther." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. To him, this wasn't betrayal, it was intimacy. But to me, it was a slow unraveling of everything I believed about marriage. At the same time, I felt something I didn't want to admit, a stirring deep inside me, a mixture of fear and longing. I hated that my body betrayed me, that the thought of it made me ache even as my mind screamed against it. I lay awake at night, torn between disgust at the idea and an unspoken thrill I couldn't silence. Mark didn't pressure me, not directly, but his silence spoke volumes. The way he looked at me now, as though waiting for an answer, left me restless. One evening I finally broke. "If I say yes," I whispered, my voice trembling, "it will change everything." He nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "Yes," he said. "But maybe that's what we need." I wanted to scream, to run, to erase the conversation from existence. Instead, I sat there, heart racing, trying to steady my breath. In that moment, I realized something terrifying. Part of me wanted to know what it would feel like. Not because of him, not because of his fantasy, but because I was suffocating under the weight of being the perfect wife. The temptation was no longer just his. It was mine too. When I finally said the words, they slipped out like a confession. "Okay," I breathed. "I'll do it." His hand tightened around mine, and a flicker of satisfaction crossed his face. I felt the ground shift beneath me, as if I had just stepped off the edge of a cliff without knowing how far the fall would be. I didn't know what I was agreeing to, not fully. All I knew was that nothing would ever be the same again. The night came sooner than I thought it would. Mark made the arrangements quietly, almost methodically, as though this had been rehearsed in his head for years. I didn't ask how he found them or what exactly he promised. All I knew was that two men, strangers to me, would be stepping into my home, into my life, and into a part of me that had belonged only to my husband until now. The weight of that knowledge pressed against my chest, and yet, beneath the fear, a dangerous current of anticipation ran through me. Their names were Darius and Malik. I repeated them to myself over and over, as though saying them would make the situation less surreal. Darius was taller, broad-shouldered, and carried himself with an easy confidence that made the room seem smaller when he walked in. Malik was quieter, observant, his presence less obvious but somehow even more intense. They both greeted me politely, their voices smooth, their eyes lingering on me just long enough to make my skin flush. Mark was there too, sitting back, calm and watchful, his silence telling me he wanted to see this play out exactly as he had imagined. The moment stretched into something unbearable. I stood there, frozen, every instinct in me screaming to stop, to send them away, to pretend none of this had ever been spoken. But then Darius stepped closer, his voice low and reassuring. "Relax," he said. "You don't have to do anything you don't want to." It should have comforted me, but instead it made my pulse race even faster. Because deep down, I already knew I wasn't going to stop. The decision had been made the moment I told Mark yes. The first touch was almost imperceptible, his fingers grazing my arm. The contact sent a shiver through me, my body betraying the chaos of my mind. Malik remained in the background, his dark eyes locked on me, studying every flicker of hesitation, every tremor in my breath. I could feel the intensity of his gaze, and it unsettled me as much as it thrilled me. Mark sat only a few feet away, silent, drinking it all in. That was the strangest part, knowing my husband was watching, that his fantasy was unfolding right before him, and that he was the one who had brought me here. I tried to ground myself in thought, to remind myself that this wasn't me, that I was only doing this because Mark wanted it. But the more I tried to distance myself, the more present I became in my own body. My skin felt hypersensitive, my breath uneven, my mind clouded with sensations I didn't want to acknowledge. I told myself I was simply playing a role, but the lines between pretense and truth blurred until I couldn't tell the difference. At one point I glanced at Mark. His eyes met mine, and what I saw there unsettled me more than anything else. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't anger. It was hunger, an intensity one hadn't seen in him in years. And for a fleeting moment, I wondered if this had been his plan all along, not just to see me with them, but to see me awaken to something I had buried deep inside myself. The night unfolded in fragments that burned themselves into my memory. Darius's laugh, deep and confident, filling the silence. Malik's hands, steady and sure, guiding me without words. The weight of my own breath echoing in my ears, betraying the fact that part of me wanted this more than I dared admit. And through it all, Mark's presence. Silent, commanding, a shadow that never let me forget I was his wife, even as I stepped further away from everything that word meant. There was a moment when I realized I had crossed a line I could never uncross. It wasn't one specific act, but a feeling, a shift in my chest as guilt and pleasure collided so violently that I could no longer separate them. I thought about the vows we had spoken on our wedding day, about the promises of exclusivity and trust. And yet, here I was, living out a scene that belonged in someone else's life, not mine. It felt wrong, but it also felt intoxicatingly alive. The tension built and built until there was no room left for thought. My body moved as though detached from the voice in my head, as though someone else had taken over and was writing this story for me. I was aware of the heat, the sound of skin against skin, the rhythm that overtook everything else. I was aware of Mark's breathing too, heavier now. His eyes locked on me like a man both aroused and haunted by his own creation. I felt like I was unraveling piece by piece, until there was nothing left but raw sensation. When it was finally over, the silence was almost unbearable. My chest rose and fell rapidly, my body trembling from a storm I didn't know how to name. Darius and Malik exchanged a look, respectful, almost protective, as though they understood the weight of what had just happened better than I did. They left quietly, their presence lingering even after the door closed behind them. Mark didn't say anything at first. He simply reached for my hand, his grip firm, almost possessive. I couldn't meet his eyes. My skin was still burning, but my heart was sinking fast. I realized then that I wasn't just exhausted. I was changed, and I had no idea whether that change would destroy me or free me. The morning light felt cruel. It spilled across the room in streaks of gold, exposing everything I wanted to hide, leaving no shadows to retreat into. I woke tangled in sheets that smelled unfamiliar, my body still humming with the residue of what had happened. For a moment before my mind caught up, I almost believed it had been a dream. But the ache in my muscles, the silence in the air, and the memory of hands that weren't Mark's shattered that illusion instantly. Beside me, Mark was already awake. He wasn't angry. He wasn't distant. In fact, he looked at me with a calmness that felt unnatural, almost tender. He brushed a strand of hair from my face and whispered, "You were beautiful." The words should have reassured me, but instead they hollowed me out. Beautiful. As though last night had been some performance, and I had been the actress delivering his fantasy. I forced a smile, but inside I felt sick. All day I carried the weight of silence. The clink of dishes, the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock. Every ordinary sound seemed sharper, mocking me. Mark moved around the house with unusual ease, humming under his breath, checking emails, sipping coffee like nothing had changed. But everything had. I felt it in my chest, a fracture that had split me open. By afternoon I couldn't hold it in anymore. "Why, Mark?" I asked, my voice trembling. He looked up from his laptop, eyebrows raised. "Why would you want that? Why would you ask me to?" My throat tightened, unable to say the words. His expression softened, almost pitying, and he closed the laptop gently. "Because it excites me," he admitted. "Because it's been in my head for so long, and seeing you, with them, it made me feel alive. And I thought it would make you feel alive too." His honesty was disarming, but it cut deep. Life. Was I so lifeless to him before? Was our marriage so dull that he had to orchestrate this spectacle just to feel something? I wanted to scream at him, to demand answers, to tell him how broken I felt. Instead, I sat in silence, my hands trembling in my lap. That night, as I lay in bed, the images replayed in my mind like a cruel film. Darius's laughter, Malik's steady gaze, the heat of their touch, my own body betraying me with its responses. And Mark, always there, always watching. Shame rose in me like a tide, but beneath it lurked something even more dangerous, the faint echo of desire. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't deny it. Part of me had wanted it. Part of me still did. The days that followed blurred together. Outwardly, we pretended nothing was wrong. We went to work, made dinner, talked about bills. But beneath the surface, I felt a distance growing inside me. Mark seemed satisfied, even closer to me in some ways, as though the experience had drawn him deeper into his own fantasy of control. But for me it was different. I felt disconnected, a stranger in my own skin. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't recognize myself. The woman staring back wasn't the wife who had once believed in monogamy, in vows, in boundaries that were never to be crossed. She was someone else now, someone who had tasted something forbidden and could never untaste it. And that terrified me. One evening, as I stood at the sink washing dishes, Mark came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. His lips brushed my ear and he whispered, "We could do it again." My body stiffened. The suggestion was casual to him, but to me it was a knife twisting in the wound. Again. As though it were something normal, something repeatable, something we could fold into our marriage like a new hobby. I pulled away, unable to hide the panic in my voice. "No. Can't. I won't." His face darkened for the first time since that night. "You can't pretend it didn't affect you," he said quietly. "I saw you. I saw how you reacted. You can deny it all you want, but you wanted it too." The word struck me like a slap. 'Cause he was right. I had wanted it. And that truth was more unbearable than anything else. That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying his words over and over. Was this the beginning of the end for us? Or was this just another evolution of what marriage meant? Twisted, unconventional, but still, in its own way, together. I didn't know. All I knew was that I felt trapped between two versions of myself. The faithful wife I used to be and the woman who had crossed a line and couldn't go back. In the quiet of the night, I whispered to myself words I could never say to him. "It wasn't just your fantasy. Became mine too. And now I don't know who I am anymore." The house was silent, but inside me everything was loud. The guilt, the shame, the thrill, the memory. They tangled together until I couldn't separate one from the other. I thought about the vows we had exchanged all those years ago, how certain I had been that nothing could shake them. But infidelity isn't always about betrayal. Sometimes it's about becoming someone you don't recognize, someone you never meant to be. And once you step into that shadow, there's no going back into the light.